You're invited to step back in time some 4,000 years to explore the ancient land of the Bible, what we now call the Middle East, and to meet legendary people whose stories have influenced millions of lives throughout history. Reader's Digest brings you Great People of the Bible. You'll see how God leads Abraham to his ultimate test of faith. Will he sacrifice his son at the Lord's command? You'll meet Abraham's son Isaac, whose twin sons Esau and Jacob, in a lifetime of conflict, battle for their birthright and their father's blessing. And you'll meet Jacob's handsome and compassionate son Joseph, sold as a slave into Egypt by his brothers, who eventually becomes one of the most powerful men in the court of Pharaoh. These are tales of intrigue, full of twists and turns, lies and deceptions, drama and passion. They are an integral part of history's most revered work of literature, the Bible. First, the story of Abraham and Sarah. We'll travel from the ancient Babylonian city of Ur, which is in modern-day Iraq, north to the city of Haran, in the region we now call southern Turkey, and then finally south into the land of Canaan, today part of Israel and Lebanon. This episode marks a great turning point in biblical history as God singles out one man and his family to receive his special revelation, care, and promises. What was so special about Abraham and Sarah, who were chosen to give birth not only to a great nation, but also to one of the most inspirational spiritual revolutions of all time? Actually, Abraham and Sarah were quite human, and even though he questioned and from time to time challenged the will of God, Abraham continued to exhibit faith, gratitude, and a unique loyalty to God on such a monumental scale that he deserves to be called, as he is, the father of us all. Our story begins in the city of Ur, in what is today Iraq. Here is where Abraham and Sarah spent their early years, about 2,000 years before the birth of Christ. The concept of one God had not yet been widely accepted, and they were surrounded by people who worshipped idols. In his waning years, Abraham's father, Terah, decided to move from Ur to the land of Canaan. So he took with him Abraham, Sarah, and his grandson Lot. They first traveled northward some 500 miles to Haran. Today, Haran is called Tel El Mugayar in southeastern Turkey. They settled there, and that is where Terah died. As the years went by, Abraham and Sarah lived an ordinary pastoral life, but there remained a tremendous void in their lives. They were never able to have children. When Abraham was 75 years old, God challenged him to his first test of faith. In Genesis 12:1, the Lord said to Abraham,
"Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great."
Abraham left his homeland in Haran to embark on a treacherous journey of some 400 miles south to the land of Canaan. His faith was strong, and he did as God commanded. With no maps to guide him, and not knowing the languages, he had to barter for provisions as he traveled through strange and sometimes hostile lands. When the caravan reached Canaan, God once again appeared, and in Genesis 12:7, the Lord said to Abraham,
"To your offspring I will give this land."
Abraham continued his journey through the land of Canaan to the oak of Moreh at Shechem, and to the mountains to the east of Bethel, where he built altars, a tribute to his faith in God. As time passed, however, Abraham's faith appeared to waver. Here he was, as God had led him, in a foreign land surrounded by pagans, and he and Sarah still childless. How was he to give this land to his offspring when he didn't have any land and he didn't have any children? And to make matters even worse, a severe famine swept through Canaan. Abraham and Sarah could not survive if they were to remain in Canaan. Not waiting for any divine message, Abraham took Sarah and Lot and the rest of his household and went down to the more fertile land of Egypt, where there was sure to be food. Before entering Egypt, Abraham had known about the killing of husbands and the kidnapping of wives. Not yet ready to trust completely in God's promise to ensure his safety, that evening, Abraham devised a plot that may very well have saved his life. He told Sarah, "You are a beautiful woman, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife,' and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Tell them instead, 'You are my sister.'" Just as Abraham had feared, the caravan was stopped as they entered Egypt. And when the officials of Pharaoh saw Sarah, they were impressed with her beauty and took her into Pharaoh's household. She was prepared for her introduction. When she was presented to Pharaoh, he was taken with her exotic appearance and the fact that she was a stranger in his land. Of course, he had no idea that she was the wife of Abraham. Pharaoh had been told she was unmarried, and he took her for his wife. What was Sarah to do? She could not protest, for to do so she would have endangered Abraham. As time went on, the pleased Pharaoh rewarded Abraham with generous gifts. Gifts of camels, sheep, oxen, slaves, and donkeys. But then, Pharaoh and his entire household suddenly became deathly ill. Because of his sin with Sarah, the Lord had afflicted Pharaoh and his people with great plagues, even though Pharaoh had no knowledge that Sarah was indeed Abraham's wife. The hurt and angry Pharaoh summoned Abraham and blamed him for the plagues. "What is this you have done to me?" he cried. "Why did you not tell me Sarah was your wife? Why did you say she was your sister so that I took her for my wife? Here is your wife then. Take her and be gone." It was a wealthier and more prosperous Abraham who took his family and returned to the land of Canaan. By then, Abraham and Lot, who was with him, owned so much cattle that their herdsmen were fighting each other for choice grazing lands.
Eliezer! Lot!
In a generous gesture befitting the benevolence of a true patriarch, Abraham took Lot to a point overlooking the land and said, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herders and mine, for we are kindred. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the land to the left, then I will take the land to the right. Or if you take the right, I will go to the left." The young Lot chose the better site, the rich and fertile land of Jordan, described in the Bible as well-watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. So Lot settled among the cities of the plain and moved his tent as far as Sodom, and Abraham settled in Canaan. In Genesis 13:14, the Lord said to Abraham,
Raise your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land that you see, I will give to you and to your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, Your offspring also can be counted. Rise up, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I will give it to you.
Abraham led his household through the land of Canaan and eventually set up his tents in Mamre, as he was commanded by God. Here Abraham built an altar to the Lord. It was there that this patriarch of peace was drawn into battle. In the valley of Siddim, in the area near the southern end of the Dead Sea, near the peninsula of Al-Lisan, a mighty war was being waged. The armies of the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah were routed by their enemies. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah fled to the hills, while the enemy took all their goods and provisions. And along with them, they took Abraham's nephew Lot as a prisoner. One of the soldiers who had escaped came and told Abraham that Lot had been taken captive. That night, Abraham assembled the men of his house, according to the Bible, 318 of them, and took off after the enemy. Abraham's army caught up with them, and under the cover of darkness, they attacked. The surprised enemy was routed and defeated. Abraham rescued Lot and brought back all the goods that had been taken. For his heroism and his deeds in battle, Abraham was honored and blessed by Melchizedek, the king of Salem, an early name for Jerusalem, who is referred to in the Bible as a priest of God Most High, and Abraham gave him a tenth of everything.
Baruch El Elyon asher migen tzarecha beyadech.
But when the grateful king of Sodom offered to let Abraham keep all the goods he had recovered in battle, Abraham declined. He took nothing. He said to the king of Sodom, "I have sworn to the Lord, God Most High, maker of heaven and earth, that I would not take a thread or a sandal thong or anything that is yours, so that you might not say, 'I have made Abraham rich.'" That night, the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision. In Genesis 15:1, the Lord said to Abraham,
Do not be afraid, Abraham. I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. Look toward heaven and count the stars. If you are able to count them, so shall your descendants be.
Whether it was impatience or a lack of faith, Sarah decided to take matters into her own hands. At that time, Sarah had an Egyptian slave girl named Hagar, and Sarah decided that Abraham should take her as a concubine to produce an heir. Sarah said to Abraham, "You see that the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my slave girl. It may be that I shall obtain children by her." So after Abraham had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarah took Hagar, her slave girl, and gave her to her husband Abraham as a wife. And when Abraham was 86 years old, Hagar bore Abraham a son. They named the child Ishmael. 13 years later, when Abraham was 99, God once more appeared and repeated his promises to Abraham. This time, however, he also added a ritual requirement. In Genesis 17:4, God said,
As for me, this is my covenant with you. You shall be the ancestor of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. And I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land where you are now an alien, all the land of Canaan for a perpetual holding. Every male among you shall be circumcised when he is 8 days old, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. Any uncircumcised male shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant.
At the same time, God also told Abraham he would give him a son by Sarah. Abraham fell down laughing. He said to himself, "How can a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? How can Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child?" Abraham then pleaded that God might recognize his son Ishmael.
Lo Ishmael.
Oh, that
Yes,
Ishmael might
yes.
live in your sight. In Genesis 17:19, God replied,
No, but your wife Sarah shall bear you a son, and you shall name him Isaac. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will bless him and make him fruitful and exceedingly numerous. He shall be the father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear you at this season next year.
That very day, Abraham, with his son Ishmael, and all the men of his household were circumcised. Sometime later, as he sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day, Abraham looked up, and 3 men suddenly appeared in front of him.
Imna matzati hen be'enecha. Hem
Abraham ran from the tent entrance to meet them and bowed down to the ground.
al avdechem.
In the tradition of Eastern hospitality, Abraham brought them water so they could wash their feet, and had Sarah and his servants prepare food for the visitors. Abraham set food before them, and they ate. They said to him, "Where is your wife Sarah?"
Hine
And he said, "There, in the tent." Then one said, "I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." The men then set out for Sodom, and Abraham went with them to show them the way. As the men turned and headed for Sodom, Abraham remained and spoke to the Lord. The Lord explained to Abraham that there was a great outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah for their wickedness and sin, and he had come to judge them. Abraham then fulfilled God's promise that he would be a blessing even to other nations. He stood before God and questioned his decision to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. If there was even a small number of God-fearing people, could not the sinners be saved? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you then destroy the place? And the Lord responded to Abraham, "If I find at Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I will forgive the whole place for their sake." Then Abraham continued to bargain with God. "Will you destroy the whole city if you find 45 righteous people?" God answered, "No." Abraham persisted. "How about 40? How about 30? How about 20? And then, perhaps remembering he was indeed arguing with the Almighty, "Oh, do not let the Lord be angry if I speak just once more. Suppose 10 are found there." Abraham's argument convinced the Lord, and the Lord promised Abraham, "For the sake of 10 righteous, I will not destroy it." And the Lord went up from Abraham. That evening, as the 2 angels arrived in Sodom, Lot, Abraham's nephew, was sitting in the gateway. He greeted them and urged them to wash and rest and feast in his home, which they did. But before they could lie down to rest, all the men of the city, young and old, surrounded the house and shouted to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we may know them." Lot stood his ground and confronted the crowd and said, "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Look, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Let me bring them out to you and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof." But the mob would have none of that. "Stand back," they yelled. "This fellow came here as an alien, and he would play the judge? Now we will deal worse with you than with them." Then they pressed hard against Lot and came near the door to break it down. But the angels of the Lord stood before the crowd, and they struck with blindness the men who were at the door of the house, young and old, so that they were unable to find the door. Then the angels of the Lord told Lot the outcry against Sodom had become great before the Lord. "Take your family out of this place, for we are about to destroy it." When morning dawned, the angels once again urged Lot, saying, "Get up, take your wife and your 2 daughters, or else you will be consumed in the punishment of the city." When they were outside, the angel said, "Run for your life, flee to the hills, and do not look back or stop anywhere in the plain. For if you look back, you will perish." Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from out of heaven, and he destroyed those cities and all the plain and all their inhabitants, everything that grew on the ground. Lot, his daughters, and his wife struggled to escape. But Lot's wife behind him could not resist the temptation. She looked back and became a pillar of salt. Early the next morning, Abraham went to the place where he had stood before the Lord, and he gazed down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and the plain, and all he could see was the smoke rising, as it is described in the Bible, like the smoke of a furnace. Lot escaped to the hills and lived in a cave with his 2 daughters. Worried that they would have no children, the older daughter said to the younger, "Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, so that we may preserve offspring through our father." So they made their father drink wine that night, and the older daughter went in and lay with her father. He did not know when she lay down or when she rose. On the next night, they also made Lot drink wine, and this time the younger daughter lay with her father. Both the daughters of Lot became pregnant by their father. The older bore a son named Moab, who is the ancestor of the Moabites. The younger bore a son named Ben-Ami, who is the ancestor of the Ammonites. The Lord did for Sarah as he had promised. Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son, and Abraham gave him the name Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old. The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast. On the night of the celebration, when Sarah saw Abraham's son Ishmael playing with Isaac, she became jealous and said to Abraham, "Cast out this slave woman with her son, for he shall not inherit along with my son Isaac." Abraham was caught between the love for his wife and the love for his son. God's voice came to Abraham and told him to do as Sarah had asked. "It is through Isaac," God said, "that offspring shall be named for you." So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar. He sent her away along with Ishmael. They wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she left the boy and sat down opposite him a good way off, for she had not the heart to listen to his cries and watch him die. "Do not let me look on the death of the child," she cried. God heard the cries of Ishmael, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "Do not be afraid, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Come, lift up the boy and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make a great nation of him." Then God opened Hagar's eyes, and she saw a spring of water. She took some in her hand and gave Ishmael a drink. Ishmael and Hagar survived their banishment. Today, Muslims trace their ancestry to Abraham through Ishmael. The pain and suffering of Ishmael and Hagar pale by comparison, however, to the ordeal that Abraham suffered when God challenged Abraham with his cruelest test of faith. In Genesis 22:2, the Lord said to Abraham,
"Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I shall show you."
What must Abraham have felt? Should he obey God's command to slaughter his son? He dutifully saddled his donkey and took his son Isaac and 2 of his young men. He cut the wood for the burnt offering and went to the place that God had shown him. On the 3rd day of their sad journey, they reached the place God had chosen for the sacrifice. Abraham told the young men traveling with him to stay with the donkey, while Abraham and Isaac went ahead to worship. "We will come back to you," said Abraham. Abraham carried the fire and the knife, while Isaac carried the wood. When they reached the spot, Abraham erected an altar. Isaac questioned his father. "The fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham then responded with the heart-rending words, "God will provide himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." When Abraham had completed the altar, he seized his son Isaac and tied his limbs together, as he would ritually tie the limbs of a sacrificial animal. He laid Isaac on the pyre. He then reached out, and without revealing his feelings, he raised the knife and prepared to kill his son. Only then did the angel of the Lord intervene. "Abraham, Abraham," he called. And Abraham responded, "Here I am." The angel of the Lord said,
"Do not lay your hand on the boy, or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from him."
And Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven.
"By myself I have sworn, says the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will indeed bless you, and I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of their enemies, and by your offspring shall all the nations of the earth gain blessings for themselves, because you have obeyed my voice." Genesis 22:15.
The story of Abraham and Sarah ends, and the story of Isaac, Jacob, and Esau begins in the land of Canaan, in the land we now call Israel. Scholars of the Bible often compare the life of Isaac with the life of Jesus, their miraculous births, and their unquestioning obedience at the time they were called upon to be sacrificed. Here is where those extraordinarily similar events took place, in Bethlehem, Jerusalem, Mamre, and Moriah, separated by 2,000 years and less than 50 miles. According to the Old Testament, Isaac's mother, Sarah, died when she was 127 years old in Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Abraham, Isaac, and her loved ones mourned and wept, and buried her in a cave facing Mamre. 3 years later, when Isaac was 40 years old, Abraham ordered his oldest, most trusted servant to find a wife for Isaac. In the tradition of the times, Abraham had him place his hand under his thigh and made him swear by the Lord that he would not choose a wife for Isaac from the Canaanites among whom they were living. Instead, Abraham wanted his servant to go back to Abraham's ancestral lands in Padan Aram, where he might find a more suitable wife for Isaac. "But suppose the woman doesn't want to follow me back here," asked the servant. "Shall I take Isaac back to your homeland?" "No, you must promise me that you will not take Isaac back there." And Abraham explained that if the woman was unwilling to follow him, the servant would be free from the oath he had sworn. The faithful old servant then took 10 of his master's camels, loaded them with beautiful gifts, and set off for the city of Nahor, which is close to Haran. He reached the outskirts of the city toward evening and had his camels kneel down beside the well of water. The women of the town were already out to draw water from the well. The servant prayed, asking for some sign from the Lord that would help him choose a wife for Isaac from among those women. "O Lord," he said, "I am standing here by the spring of water, and the daughters of the townspeople are coming out to draw water. When I say, 'Please, let me sip a little water from your jar,' let the one you have chosen for Isaac say, 'Drink, and I will water your camels also.'" Even before he had finished praying, the beautiful Rebekah, daughter of one of Abraham's nephews, appeared with a water jar on her shoulder. The servant went to meet her and said, "Please let me sip a little water from your jar." He wondered if she was the woman God had chosen to be the wife of Isaac. Then Rebekah answered. She answered with a sign from God. "Drink, my lord, and I will draw water for your camels also." The servant knew then that God had chosen Rebekah to be the wife of Isaac, and asked if there was room for him to spend the night in her father's house. Rebekah ran home and told her brother Laban what had happened. And Laban returned to the spring to invite the stranger and his party into their home. Before they ate, the servant told Rebekah's family that he had been sent by Abraham to find a wife for Isaac. And recognizing that the servant was blessed by the Lord, they agreed to let Rebekah leave with him. The next morning, Rebekah and her maids prepared for the long trip back to Canaan. Then they mounted the camels and went with the servant to meet Isaac. Isaac was settled in the Negev and happened to be out for a stroll in the field. When he looked up, he saw camels approaching and went to meet the caravan. When Isaac and Rebekah saw each other for the first time, it was love at first sight. She slipped quickly from her camel and whispered to the servant, "Who is that man over there, walking in the field to meet us?" The servant said, "That is my master, Isaac." Rebekah quickly covered herself with her veil, as was proper for a maiden. The servant then introduced Rebekah to Isaac and told him everything that had happened on his trip, how he prayed for a sign from the Lord, and how the beautiful Rebekah gave him that sign. Rebekah and Isaac fell very much in love and were married, and there was a great celebration. In Genesis 24:67, the Bible tells us,
Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. He took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death.
Abraham lived to the age of 175, as the Bible describes him, an old man and full of years. His sons, Isaac and Ishmael, came together for the last time to bury their beloved father in the cave of Machpelah, in the field east of Mamre, where they had buried Sarah. After Abraham died, God blessed Isaac, and Isaac and Rebekah settled at Beer Lahai Roi. After 20 years of marriage, Rebekah finally became pregnant. Rebekah was having difficulty conceiving a child, but Isaac prayed to the Lord, and the Lord answered his prayer, thereby perpetuating the family of Abraham. Rebekah's pregnancy was extremely difficult. She had conceived twins, and the children within her were scuffling even before they were born. This was distressing to Rebekah, who said, "If it is to be this way, why do I live?" In Genesis 25:23, the Lord explained to Rebekah,
"Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The elder shall serve the younger."
And when her time came to give birth, the first twin was born covered in red hair. The second child emerged holding on to his brother's heel.
תאומים היו בבטנה. הראשון אדמוני כולו כעדרת שיער.
The first child they named Esau,
ואחרי כן יצא אחיו.
and the younger they named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when his sons were born. As the boys grew, Esau learned to be an outdoorsman and a skillful hunter, while Jacob was more of a shepherd and herder. Esau became his father's favorite, and Jacob was his mother's. And as the years went by, the brothers grew their separate ways, and when they were young men, something happened that drew them even further apart. One day, when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau staggered back from the field, exhausted and starving. "Let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished," said Esau. And Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright." Jacob was demanding that Esau turn over to him whatever might become his as Isaac's firstborn. The famished Esau agreed to the sale with the words, "I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" "Swear to me first," insisted Jacob. And Esau swore to him. Only then did Jacob offer him food, and only later did the full effect of this oath become apparent. When a famine came to the land, Isaac considered going to Egypt, where he knew there would be food, as his father Abraham had done before him. He traveled as far as Gerar. But then Isaac received his first vision. In Genesis 26:2, the Lord appeared to him and said,
"Do not go down to Egypt. Settle in the land that I shall show you. Reside in this land as an alien, and I will be with you, and will bless you. For to you and your descendants I will give all these lands, and I will fulfill the oath that I swore to your father Abraham."
So Isaac trusted in the word of the Lord and settled in Gerar, the land of the Philistines. When the men of Gerar asked him about Rebekah, he was afraid to say she was his wife. "Because she is so attractive," he thought, "the men might kill me for her sake." So he told them she was his sister. When Isaac had been in Gerar a long time, one day King Abimelech looked out and saw Isaac caressing Rebekah. He called for Isaac and said, "So she is your wife. Why then did you say she was your sister?" Isaac then explained that he was fearful that if he said she was his wife, he might be killed for her sake. Abimelech was upset with Isaac. "What have you done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us." But sensing the hand of the Lord, Abimelech warned all the people, "Whoever touches this man or his wife shall be put to death." The Lord blessed Isaac so abundantly that his crops reaped 100-fold, and he became very wealthy. From there, Isaac went up to Beersheba, where the Lord appeared to him. In Genesis 26:24, the Lord said to him,
I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you, and will bless you and make your offspring numerous for my servant Abraham's sake.
In Genesis 27:1, we read of Isaac as old and rather feeble. His eyes were dim so that he could not see. He called to his firstborn and favorite son, Esau, for he wanted to give him his blessing. To understand the full impact of this story, it is important to know that according to ancient belief, blessings or curses were powerful acts because they had the power to produce the intended results. A blessing, once given, could neither be withdrawn nor given to another, for it came from God. Here is where God's prophecy to Rebekah before her sons were born is fulfilled. The elder shall serve the younger. Isaac told Esau to take his weapons and hunt game, and then prepare a savory dish for him before he gave him his blessing. Rebekah overheard Isaac's instructions to Esau and quickly devised a plan so that Jacob, her favorite son, would receive the blessing from Isaac. She told Jacob to choose 2 choice kids from the household flock and bring them to her, so that she might prepare savory food for Isaac. She then explained to Jacob, "You shall take it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies." But Jacob was fearful that his father would see through the deception. "Look," he said, "my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a man of smooth skin. If my father were to feel me, he would know I was Jacob, not Esau, and he'd bring his curse upon me rather than his blessing." "Let your curse be on me," she said. "Obey my word and get them for me." And so it was that Jacob got them, and Rebekah prepared savory food, just as Isaac loved. For his disguise, Rebekah took some of Esau's finest clothes and put them on Jacob. She put the skins of the kids on his wrists and hands, and on the smooth part of his neck. When Rebekah was satisfied that Jacob would appear hairy to Isaac, she handed him the savory food she had prepared. Jacob entered the tent and called to his father. "My father," he said. "Who are you, my son?" asked the old man. "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat of my gain, so that you may bless me." Isaac was suspicious. "How is it you hunted the game and cooked it so quickly, my son?" And Jacob answered, "Because the Lord your God granted me success. Come near, that I may feel you, my son, to know whether or not you are really my son Esau." So Jacob went up close to him. Isaac felt his hands and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Are you really my son Esau?" And Jacob answered, "I am." He then gave his father the food and wine, and his father ate and drank. After having eaten, Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near and kiss me, my son." Jacob came near and kissed him, and Isaac smelled the smell of Esau's clothing. And now convinced he was Esau, he gave Jacob his blessing. No sooner had Isaac finished blessing Jacob than his brother Esau returned from his hunting. When Esau went in to his father with the food he had prepared, Isaac asked, "Who are you?" Esau answered, "I am your firstborn son, Esau." Isaac then realized he had been deceived, and he asked Esau, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me before you came, and I have blessed him? Yes, and blessed he shall be." When Esau heard his father's words, he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and pleaded with his father, "Bless me, me also, father." But Isaac said, "Your brother came deceitfully, and he has stolen your blessing." "He has supplanted me twice," cried Esau. "First he took away my birthright, and now he has taken away my blessing. Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" Then Isaac answered Esau's plea, "I have already made him your lord, and I have given him all his brothers as servants, with grain and wine to sustain him. What then can I do for you, my son?" "Have you only one blessing?" cried Esau. "Bless me, me also, father." And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. There was nothing Isaac could do. The deed was done, and Esau had lost the blessing he should have received as the firstborn son. Now Esau hated Jacob for what he had done, and Esau vowed that once his father died, he would kill Jacob. Esau's threat reached Rebekah, and she explained to Jacob, "Your brother is consoling himself by planning to kill you." She then instructed Jacob to flee at once to Haran, where he could stay with her brother Laban. "Until Esau forgets what you have done to him, then I will send for you and bring you back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" Then Isaac called Jacob and once again blessed him, and ordered him not to marry any of the Canaanite women, but to go at once to Padan Aram and take one of the daughters of Rebekah's brother Laban as a wife. Jacob then left Beersheba and headed toward Haran, and it was on this journey that he experienced an astonishing heavenly vision. He had traveled about 12 miles in the wilderness to the north of what is now called Jerusalem. When the sun had set, he chose a place to rest, and he picked up one of the stones for a pillow, put it under his head, and fell asleep. He dreamed there was a ladder suspended between heaven and earth, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood beside him. And in Genesis 28:13, he said to Jacob,
I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. And your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. And you shall spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you.
When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. He anointed with oil the stone upon which he had slept, setting it apart for God's use, and named the place Bethel, meaning house of God. He also vowed to give God 1/10 of his earnings, or a tithe, if he were, as God had promised, to return safely to Canaan.